Hey guys, welcome back to Maxim Automation. Today, as part of our Git tutorial series, we are going to see how to create a remote repository and how you can move your source code from your local Git repository to remote repository. If you like this tutorial, then please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. So let's start with today's session. In my last video, we saw how to create your Git repository on your local machine, and then how you can commit your changes to the same repository. So when you are done with committing your changes, then the next thing which you need to do is to push your code from your local Git repository to the centralized server, which implements Git. The reason why we need an online hosting system is because the Git which we have installed to create our repository runs on our local machine. And the files and their history are also stored on your local computer itself. But when you are a part of a team where multiple developers are working, then you have to collaborate and to work with other developers which might be sitting on different geolocations. And then you need an online hosting systems where you can push your source code changes and also can download the changes from other developers. So these online hosting systems helps in collaboration among the developers and keep tracks of files changes and their revision histories. There are multiple remote systems which uses Git, like GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, and there are other host system as well which uses Git. And the online host system which I am going to use to create my Git repository is GitHub. GitHub is an open source hosting platform which provides the software development version control. It's a cloud-based service platform where developers manage and store their code. It is the largest or one of the largest online storage space which is being used by the developers across the globe. I feel GitHub has a much better interface than other systems, but you can use any other hosting system as well based on your requirement. And I'm assuming that your organization team is already using one of these platforms. So that was about GitHub. Now let's see how can we create our remote repository using it. Before creating a repository, you need to create an account in GitHub first. So you can simply sign up or create your account by using your email ID and then provide the basic information. Once you are done with account creation on GitHub, then you are all set to create your repository. So I already have an account in GitHub, and I'm going to use the same to create a repository. Just log into GitHub using your email ID and password. Once logged in, then you'll be able to see the home page. Here you can see that I already have a repository created for one of my projects. Now, if I want to create a new repository, then you can see that we are getting an option over here to create a new repository. Let's click on it and it will redirect us to create new repository page. Here you can see the account under which I'm going to create my repository. And then the field where we need to provide the repository name. So I'm going to provide the repository name as Git demo. And then if you want, you can add the description of the repository. This is totally optional. After that, you can choose whether you want to create a public or private repository. If you create a public one, then anyone can see this repository, but you can choose the person who can commit. And if you choose to create a private repository, then only you can see and commit the changes into this. After that, if you want, you can create your repository by adding these files, like a README file, which basically contains the project description, or a gitignore file, which contains all the file templates which you don't want to track and ignore when you commit your changes. If I'm going to select any of the files, then you can see that this will set the main as a default branch. So if you want to change your default branch name, then you can go to the settings page and then update the default branch name. The reason I have updated the default branch name as master, because if you remember, then in my last video, I have configured the Git on my local machine with the default branch name as master. So I'm going to update the same here as well. In case you have set your default branch as main in your local machine, then you can update the main here as well. Now, if I go back and refresh the page, and I'll provide the repository name again. And now if I choose this option, then you can see now it says that this will set the default branch as master. So now I'm going to skip this step and create the repository without these files, as because I have already created a Git repository and placed at my local system. So after that, just hit the create repository button to create your repository. So here my repository has been created, but because I have not added any files yet, so currently this is empty. Here you can see that it says that we can add our files by creating a new Git repository on our local system. And then we can push it to the server by using these commands. You can see that these are the commands which we discussed in my last video to create a Git repository and then commit the changes to the same. Or if we already have a Git repository created on our machine, then we can directly push the changes to the remote repository. And we don't need to perform the above steps again. Then the third option is that we can browse the folder and import the project directly over here. Now let me go to the project location at my system where we have created our Git repository. So this is the source code of my project for which I have created a Git repository in my last video. Now if I start the Git bash and if I type the command git status, then you can see that only 2 files have been added so far to the staging area. Now let's say that I want to move all the files to my Git repository. So I'm going to type git add followed by dot. Now if I do the git status again, then you can see all the files have been moved to the staging and ready to be committed. Now let's commit the files to the repository by typing the command git commit. And then I'm going to provide the comment as added a new project. So all the files have been committed to the Git repository on my local machine. And if we see here, it says to push the changes to our remote repository, we need to perform these steps. First, we need to add the origin or the remote repository URL where we want to push our changes. And then to push the changes, we need to perform the command git push origin master. So this is the URL of our remote repository. You can always get this URL by moving to your repository page. And the same URL you need to use for pushing your changes or taking changes from the repository. Now let's move to the git bash and then type the command git remote add origin and then paste the repository URL. After that, type the command git push -u origin master. to push the code from your local machine to the remote repository. So master is the branch on which we have worked on, and we wanted to push that branch to the remote repository. Now the code has been pushed to this remote server. So one thing to notice over here is that when we perform the git command, then it asks for the GitHub username and password to connect with the repository. As I've already connected with the repository, so it did not prompt any dialog box to input the credentials. But when you do it for the first time, then you will be getting a pop-up to input your credentials. So when asked, then just provide your GitHub account credentials to connect Git Bash with the GitHub repository. And now, if I go to the GitHub and refresh the page, then you can see that our code has been pushed to the remote repository. And now anyone can see this code and can get the copy of the code to perform their changes. We can see the commit history in this page to track who all has committed to the project and what they have committed. Also, you can see that we are getting the commit messages here, which I have provided during git commit operation. And if I click on this, then we can see all the files which have been added or modified in this commit. Here we can find the list of branches we have added under this repository. We can have multiple branches, which we're going to discuss in one of my next sessions. Now let's say that you have pushed your changes to the repository, and then again you go back to your project to perform other changes. So you can update any file. Let's say I'm going to create a new feature file by creating a copy of the existing one. Also, I want to update the content of an existing feature file. So let me open this file and I'll update the content of this feature file. Now, if I do the git status again, then it says that one file is modified and the other one is untracked because our repository doesn't have any information about this new file. Let me add both the files to staging. Now both the files are ready to be committed. And to commit the file again, we need to type the command git commit, followed by the commit message. Added one feature file and modified one file. And now to push the changes to GitHub repository, we need to just type git push origin master. So the code has been pushed to the repository again. So let me go to the GitHub. Let's refresh the page again. Now you can see that we have two commits in this repository. And if I go to the commit details, then we can see that we have got one recent commit. And if I click on this, then we can see this file has been modified in this commit. Initially, the value was $49.99, and then it has been modified to $49.00. And in this file, we can see that everything is new. So it means a new file has been added to the repository. So we have seen how we can push our local repository work to our remote server. And let's say that someone wants to take the latest copy of the code from my GitHub repository to his local machine. Then how can we do that? So let's go back to the folder where I want to take the code. So this is the empty folder where I can download the source code from the repository. So let's open the Git bash here. To get the code from the repository, we need to type the command called git clone and then the GitHub repository URL. You can get the URL by moving to the GitHub page and then click on this code and then copy the URL in clipboard. After that, let's move to the Git bash and paste the URL over here. And then provide the folder name if you want to take the code further inside any folder. If you don't want to create a new folder further, then you can omit the folder name. This is totally optional. If provided, then it will create a folder over here first, and then we'll copy the code inside that folder. If folder name is not provided, then it will copy all the code to the current directory. So I'm going to provide a folder name and then press enter. Here you can see that a folder has been created with name demo project. And inside this folder, our project will get cloned. Now, if I move to this folder, then you can see that we have got the source code from the repository. And if I move to this folder in Git bash as well and do the git status, then we can see that it shows the branch name of the GitHub repository from which we have cloned this project. So this is how you can create your GitHub repository and push your local changes to the server. Please try it by yourself and put your comments in the comment box for any query. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel.